a significant sum of outside capital with a ton of pressure, especially in the short to midterm, to go and drive growth and perform. And I kind of watched this business lose its soul in that process.
There's an entire generation of Americans who no longer care about prestige, titles, work travel, fancy offices, and lunches. Welcome to Mundane Millionaires, a podcast for this generation of small business owners who want to set their ego aside and focus on what matters: family, community, quality of life, and cash flows. In each episode, Eric Pacifici and Kevin Henderson uncover what it takes to get a little money in the bank, control your time, and invest in building great families and lives. Let's get started.
Kevin, welcome to Mundane Millionaires. Good to see you, man. How are you? How's everything?
Great. Always good to hang out on a Friday and chat with you and a kick-ass entrepreneur. So yeah, I'm happy. Great
was
hour.
In over my head there with Mr. Chase Murdock, man, especially on a Friday. And you said it's Friday. I'm going to take your word for that. But I was a little sleepy there. It was an amazing episode. You met Chase on a mountain. Is that right? Was that the first time you met him?
No, the first time I met Chase, I actually flew out to Salt Lake for a happy hour he was hosting that a number of clients and potential clients were going to be at. So I decided to hop a plane. It was, a lot of folks were in town for it. It was a really fun event. So he hosted it at Taylor Cooperative, one of his businesses in Decada Group that we talk a lot about in the episode. So I met Chase the first time there and I think saw him at a conference or two in between. But then, I think we've mentioned on previous episodes, I did this Kilimanjaro trek with a handful of entrepreneurs and Chase was part of that crew. So really got to know Chase and his story on the side of a mountain, a half a world away. And it just, I knew we had to have him on the podcast because just what a fascinating story from super young entrepreneur to, like, candidly, and he opens up about it, we talk about it, to business failure and then back into the entrepreneur game.
I love the way you said jump a flight. You were like, I decided to jump a flight. No big deal.
It's Salt Lake.
There's a flight there. I just decided to jump on it and go see what's going on.
I make no secret of, outside of San Diego, Salt Lake is one of my favorite places in America. So
Utah is fantastic.
I rarely need an excuse to go there.
Somebody made a crack about Provo, Utah recently. That incredibly beautiful place. I don't know. You'd have to be out of your mind and not think that place is gorgeous. But so you got to know Chase well and really impressed. I think that the Chase has this way about him that is interesting. Like, he's totally a guy I would buy a suit from, by the way. The way he talks about it, he's got really, like, eloquent speech patterns. Very, like, well put
You could
together
tell
guy.
He loves his business, right?
Yes.
That this isn't a money-making scheme. He actually loves the idea of custom tailored suiting and custom, like,
totally.
That passion comes out in the way he talks about his business.
Well, and he gets into it later. I think he just is having fun with business generally, right? Was such a business role model of sorts, because he talks about the fact that, like, hey, I could probably make more money doing a pure play roll up instead of doing a diversified holding company in Decada. But, like, we're kind of building a lifestyle here and we want something for us. And I enjoy kind of the diversity, and that's where the fun comes in. And I don't know that there's a ton. I think that's pretty sophisticated business mind to put quality of life and other things ahead of just pure play money making.
It's a level of maturity in the business world that I think, and we probably should have spent more time on that point specifically, but I have to assume grew out of his younger years when it was very much the grind, raise capital, revenue growth off the charts, working 100 hours a week, and seeing where that ended, effectively being pushed out of the company that he built from scratch, probably causes a little bit of that step back and reevaluate what's really important, because I'm not going to get those 100-hour work weeks back. And is there a smarter way to build wealth in small business? And I think he's just such a thoughtful entrepreneur from that angle, in terms of really get to know what's driving you. And that may not be profit in every instance, and that's okay. And I love that
Yeah.
about Decada Group.
Being, something you talked, being fired from a business that you built, a big business that you built
Yeah.
in your, late teens into your early 20s, and being fired at 23 by your investors is, an experience that not many people have in a lifetime. And
Totally.
what a way to start a business career. And I guess reflecting on that one point alone, it's no surprise that he is having the success that he had,
Yep.
having had that level of growth. Type of situation where like you don't need to go on and get an MBA after something like that. And nothing against an MBA, but because at that point, I mean, you've had a business experience and business learnings that very few people have had. Meanwhile, in other news, before we flip over to Chase, S&B Law Group is now hiring for a board of directors, advisory board. It's a little. So even though this pod is not affiliated with S&B law firm, to be clear,
we're only recruiting big law lawyers, though. We want a Kirkland partner, we want a Cravath partner on our board of advisors to
absolutely
really help us take our return to work to the next level.
This is a joke. We're joking. For the bar examiners that are listening, we are joking. But certainly, Kevin, if we could find somebody who could just tell us how we could continually ratchet up our hourly rate each year, not at all in relation to substance or reality, that would be fantastic. So if you're out there,
DMs
get at us. DMs are open. All right. On that note.
Well, yeah, with that, let's kick it over. Fascinating conversation. I think people that if you don't already know Chase Murdock, you're going to end this hour just loving his story and
such a likable guy.
Yeah. So
such a
enjoy, and we will catch you next week. All right, guys, welcome back. Super excited to have with us today Chase Murdock we've been saying it before we hit record. Is it Decada Group? Is that how we pronounce it, Chase?
Yeah, you got it, Kevin. Yeah, Decada Group.
Decada Group. Okay,
a
great.
Holding company.
Yeah, so Decada Group is a holding company. We'll jump into this here in a second, but Decada owns, I guess, four businesses. It's not a roll-up model. They're all kind of different businesses. So we'll go into sort of the thinking and strategy and things like that. But before we get to Decada, let's just jump right in and start back from the beginning. I think one of the most interesting things about your story, Chase, is that the sort of inaugural company of Decada Group, Tailor Cooperative, is a custom suit and tailor shop, but it's not your first foray into that business. You actually had a suit kind of custom suit shop years ago as a young entrepreneur. So take us back to like how your path into entrepreneurship as a very young entrepreneur and how you stumbled into this industry of custom tailored suits.
Yeah, well,
real quick, but before you do that, Chase, the beautiful thing about your story is that Kevin and I constantly get calls from folks that are trying to build a holding company before they've bought their first business. Yeah. So your story today is a fascinating one for anybody who's listening that wants to build a holding company and is thinking about making that first acquisition. So it'll be fascinating to kind of hear the realities of what a build like this looks like. So anyway,
yeah, we'll get there, but
start off with Taylor.
I think I used the word holding company after I had a holding company, which is typically the opposite. So we stumbled into it completely accidentally and naively. But yeah, rewinding the tapes, I guess, Kevin, what you're not saying, we hiked Mount Kilimanjaro together, and on a late night in the tent, we were all going around talking about like our biggest, I don't even remember the prompt, but I remember just sharing 15 minutes of raw failure with the group. So let's go deep. We could kind of come back to it. But I've always been attracted to entrepreneurship. I'm an entrepreneur ever since like right out of high school. My career has been a string of entrepreneurial projects. And one of my first businesses was coming off the heels of living out in Asia. I relocated out to the Philippines for work, and I was out there for a little less than a year and ended up buying a couple of custom suits in the Far East, some from Hong Kong, some from Vietnam, some from Thailand. Anyone who's been out to Asia has had a similar experience to what I had, which is you jump in the back of a tuk-tuk in Bangkok and they get paid if they swing by custom suit shops and upsell you to go buy a custom suit. And I was hooked, line, and sinker. They get kickbacks. I think it's they fill up their gas tank if you buy a custom suit. I later learned. But
interesting. Okay.
I bought a bunch of custom suits living out in Asia, and was fascinated with the product. Was fascinated with the supply chain. I had one custom suit made in Hong Kong that was just a work of art. Just felt immaculate. And I had another custom suit made in Vietnam that was falling apart in the plane ride home. And that kind of captured my imagination of what's the difference and how do you make a
Yeah.
quality custom suit. So I moved back to Utah. And at 19, I started a company and raised some venture capital around this idea of importing custom suits into the States. And we had a distributed sales model. We were hiring personal clothiers, we called them, to go out in the homes and offices of our clients and sell affordable custom clothing. And it was it was like my MBA in the world of hard knocks. We grew from zero to I think,
Right.
million a year at our high point in multiple states. I was this young rookie at the helm of this company, 22 years old, trying to act like I had it all together with this board of VCs and investors with silver hair and wisdom that I had not yet gotten in my career. But it sparked yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, so pause there for a second, because, I hear 19 years old, you're like virtually fresh out of high school, right? Maybe a year here. You go overseas for a temporary assignment for work. And this pivots into, I'm going to launch my own company and I'm going to go raise VC capital. I don't know many 19 or 20-year-olds thinking like that. I'm just curious what it was. Was it earlier in your background? Was it something kind of you were exposed to fresh into the workforce? What was it that turned you onto this idea that, I, as a 19-year-old kid still effectively can go raise millions of dollars from sophisticated Silicon Valley types and launch a
Ballsy.
business? Yeah, it's super
I mean,
gutsy.
like anything, it sounds better, when you look back years ahead in a simplified format. But like at the time, I was importing suits for, my dad and for my friends. And it took someone like literally grabbing me by the shoulder saying, Chase, this is a business. This is not a hobby. You need to incorporate. And, I had a co-founder and we started making more suits and getting more in revenue. And I had someone else grab me by the shoulders and say, Chase, like you should raise money. There's investors out there that are, willing to write a check for something like this. And we raised a small, angel round and I didn't know much about the world of Silicon Valley and venture. But as I started to kind of play in that space, I started to surround myself with people where that was the norm. Utah was going through quite the technology burst. Omniture had just sold, WordPerfect was based out of Utah. And it spawned all of the success that really percolated through the ecosystem where there was a lot of money being raised in Utah. And Utah is often called, ironically, Silicon Slopes now. There's a really big presence of entrepreneurship tech. And so, it sounds like at 19, I went from, one suit to raising VC, but it was 18 months of meandering, confused in the hills, trying to figure out what to go do about it. Right.
Got it. So your start was really like your next door neighbor, wants a suit for church. And you're like, well, I got a guy in Hong Kong. Let me hook you up, and you just add a little margin. I mean, that was really the birth story here.
Totally. I mean, our big moment was a buddy of mine. He had a ton of extended family in from out of town. This was before we even incorporated, and said, hey, I have like 8 of my brothers in town. And I told him about what you do. Can you come over? And I called up my business partner. It was the day after Christmas. And we drive over and walk out with a $6,000 check and felt like we had won the lottery. And that's kind of what got us really moving. So the game of 0 to 1 is just so fundamentally different from 1 to 2, right? It's you're trading blood, sweat, tears in order to go create something that at the time doesn't look like a clear path to success. But on the way back, looking backward, if you squint your eyes, you can kind of see those lines connecting those dots that get it there. But we had a great product. We found product market fit easily. It was an awesome client experience, and we were growing really quick. And so we raised a ton of capital, hundreds of thousands at a time, and then eventually, millions at a time. I think in total we raised $2 or $3 million in VC. And it's, when you raise that amount of capital, you're buying growth. You're investing aggressively in trying to go capture market share. And we had a really great addressable market. We were expanding into multiple states. And next thing I knew, I was running an organization I was just wholly unqualified to own and operate. But it was a blast. It was one thing after another. I remember in my 3rd or 4th year, we had outgrown 4 or 5 factories out in the Far East. We just kept growing through factories. And I would be out in China multiple times a year. And in this case, I had to drop everything and fly out to China to go solve a weird integration problem with our platform and our factory. and you had to fly out there, solve the problem, and fly back. And yeah, fast forwarding a little bit, it was I ended up walking into the boardroom one day, arriving to the board meeting what I thought was a couple minutes early, but I was the last one in the room. And seated in front of me was the full board and 2 sheets of paper, my buyout agreement and my severance agreement. And at 23, 24, I got ousted from my baby that I started and sacrificed so much. And
Wow.
it was quite the journey for me. And looking back, I am grateful for that experience. You learn a lot when you go from 0 to 1 and go through so much growth.
Right.
And it had me really reflect a lot about me as an operator, as an entrepreneur, and the style of company I really want to build as an operator.
Was that all sort of post hoc exploring and kind of introspection that you did, or was there ever a time during the journey while you're acting as CEO of this company where you were really starting to feel and maybe realize like this thing's growing, the growth here of this company is outpacing my growth as a 22-year-old executive, maybe I need to start thinking differently? Did that happen like while you're in the thick of it, or did this all kind of come afterwards as you've been able to put some experience, more experience under your feet, disconnect from the company and really look back and start to see that in the rearview mirror?
Yeah, I don't feel like I was reflecting a lot in that time. I was working 60, 70, 80-hour work weeks. The pressure was just tremendous.
You were mad. Were you?
I was insane. I was so committed to making the company work that I was giving it everything I had. And yeah, I mean, I think that looking back, maybe there were moments where I was like, sheesh, I might not be the guy for the job here. But in order to fool everyone else that I had it all together, I felt like I also had to fool myself. And, don't get me wrong, I was voraciously reading and listening to audiobooks and surrounding myself with other entrepreneurs. But when you're growing that quickly and that's your first startup and you're in your early 20s, it's so disorienting. You just don't have context of what normal company building looks like, what a normal CEO's day-to-day looks like, how to lead people. My board forced me to go hire a really senior COO, and we spent more time arguing over just the dumbest things throughout the week than actually trying to go move the company forward. And yeah, it was quite the adventure. And on one hand, it was successful. We built a company that was thriving, thousands of customers, multiple states. For me, it was successful in that I learned a ton about myself and learned a lot about, again, what kind of career I want to build in the realm of entrepreneurship. But at the time, it felt like a complete flop. It felt like a total failure that was public, and the shame associated with running a company that doesn't work out. It was my whole identity. Yeah. You can't work 60, 70-hour work weeks and not have it be your whole identity. So, it was a very shaping moment for me. I don't think I was going through that time, especially after having been fired, thinking this will be good for me. This is a really shaping, defining moment. It just felt horrible. Yeah. But looking back, obviously, you can kind of see it.
What was it like being fired, Chase? I mean, it's an important message. There's a lot of people that are listening to this that are prospective buyers that are thinking about doing, a traditional search versus a self-funded search, or thinking about bringing in investors into a transaction. And I don't think that there's enough of a realization that more than just the dollars they're giving you and the equity they're taking in the company, they're also incrementally taking control from you. So the idea that I'm going to go be an entrepreneur and buy a business and become my own boss is undermined to an extent the more people you add to your cap table and a variety of different approaches.
Sure.
And so you had a group of people. Tell us about the cap table and what it was like being fired from a company that you founded.
Yeah, well, about the cap table. So every time we raise a round of financing, dilution, impacts everyone. You're just continuing to raise money. And what good looks like when you're raising VC is, owning 20, 30% at exit. That's rare. It's very common for these founders to get crammed down into single digits. I can't remember exactly where I was, but it was definitely north of single digits. But what's it like to get fired? I mean, so I definitely, I'll blame it on my youth and maybe hubris, but I think for entrepreneurs who are in that position, the best possible thing you can do is recognize your investors make a bet in you individually and a bet in the company. And your job as the leader is to somehow grow and develop as fast or faster than your company. And when you go buy a small business and you're compounding with inflation and you're growing 10, 20%, it's very doable as long as you're reflective and, investing in yourself. When you're growing thousands of percentage points a year, it's quite challenging, especially for someone in their early 20s. And that's why you have a board. That's why you have advisors. That's why these young, Silicon Valley entrepreneurs try to surround themselves with good, smart money where there's some wisdom in the room to help you make those decisions. I think in the good times when things were going well, I was surrounded by brilliant people who were acting as advisors. When times were bad, I think I would tend to revert to, don't worry, we've got it all together. And here's my plan. And don't worry about it, I'll take care of it, as opposed to, what I would advise one of our operators or perhaps someone in traditional search is, hey, we have a problem and I want to bring you in so we can co-work on this together and figure out how to navigate it. You're the jockey helping guide the business. You're not Superman trying to go, ensure that everything goes perfectly to plan. Because company building's messy. If there's one thing I've learned across, a dozen companies in my career is things take twice as long, it costs 3 times as much every single time. Even when you have conservative expectations, it's messy. And so your job as the entrepreneur and capital allocator is to really have that head on your shoulders and help those around you really look at problems objectively, as opposed to masking them and acting like you have it together.
So put differently, and what I hear you saying is in those tough times, you pivoted a little bit into like sales role to the board rather than sort of coming to them hat in hand of like, hey, we got a problem and I could really use your help. Is that effectively the idea is look at these folks actually as advisors. That's why they're there. They want to help. They don't want to be reacting when shit's really hit the fan. They want to be right as stuff's getting difficult, like bring them in and rely on them to help.
Exactly right. Now that I'm on the other side of the table, right, working with our operators who are trying to do the same thing, solve these problems, is, the best operators shine in moments of challenge. Like that's a moment to really come to the table and work collectively on a problem. There's always problems in company building. And so, coming at it from an ally standpoint as opposed to a salesperson standpoint, that's a good call out.
Well, on that note, while we have a referee on the phone, Eric, there's a few things I feel like I need to let you know about.
For sure. Well, Kevin, he brings up a really interesting point, and we watch a lot, through our firm, we watch a lot of younger folks, he put that in quotations, I guess, relative to how young you were, but, freshly minted MBAs that go and buy businesses that haven't ever been in there in the company building. And you talk about having a board or people to advise you. And we've seen some searchers who have raised capital and have brought on, smart advisors, and others that are completely going on their own, first-time entrepreneur, first-time business buyer, leaving a corporate gig and are going to go buy an SMB. I won't use a specific example. What advice would you give them, Chase, based on your experience across multiple businesses in terms of what type of support you need and how you go find that in your business? And do you necessarily have to give up equity in order to have somebody, invested enough in order to feel like you can take their counsel?
Yeah. Oh man, so many thoughts come to mind. So, first of all, operating a business is hard. It's lonely. It's challenging. You hit new problems every day. It's a grind. It's not a 2-year sprint and exit. It's a multi-year project. And so, there's several different approaches. It's managing your headspace on one hand. It's having a peer group. It's having people you can go to in times of crisis for wisdom and thoughts and perspective. But it's also like making sure you're pairing yourself with the right business and opportunity. We're starting to see, as interest rates go up and as more people come into the space of ETA, we're starting to see, unfortunately, a lot more stories of failure, of bankruptcy, of companies not working out. And so I think going in with the right advisors is a good idea, especially if you're coming in from like a finance background or coming in right out an MBA and you've never operated a company. Operating can be really challenging, and that transition is a really tough transition to make. And so reflecting, are you up for that challenge individually? Do you have a clear perspective of what that challenge looks like? One of my best friends, before he bought his business, went on a bit of a tour across the US and went from kind of small business to small business, shadowing what a day in the life is like, to get a picture of like, can I do this? What does it look like off Twitter? Where there's no glamour, do I have the ability to do that? So advice for that, I look at traditional search almost similar to the way I look at the beginning of my career. It was really high stakes, didn't own the majority of the company or the entirety of the company. but surrounded by a lot of wisdom and the ability to go work on something a little bit bigger. I look at self-funded search as an opportunity to really control the cap table, continue to have majority control, and something you can really build for years and years and years without without as strong a pressure to exit. So I think any entrepreneur just needs to take inventory of why are you doing this in the first place? What does good look like? What does that look like 10 years out, and work backward? And entrepreneurship is just a vehicle to align your work with what you want out of life. That's the beautiful part of it, right? And so being really intentional with what you want your outcome to look like if things go well, and then how you build with that in mind. That's the secret to success, I think.
But let me double click on the board concept though, because I think this is a fascinating one. I'm buying a business tomorrow as a freshly minted MBA or a corporate guy who's never been a entrepreneur before. Based on your experience, Chase, what type of support do I need in terms of peer groups and board composition, and where do I find the board? How do I incentivize? And what would you put together if you were starting over from scratch in one of those capacities?
I mean, so I sit on 2 advisory boards for free, for fun, of 2 folks who have went and bought a small business. And I think what you'll find is a lot of people are willing to get involved and support you. And forming an advisory board, or if you're required to, forming a board of an official board of directors can be really valuable as a sounding board. One of the things we tell our operators is one of the most important things that makes the difference between a great leader and a good leader is you have all these potential decisions to make, all these potential problems to go solve, and identifying of that list of 400, which 3 are the most important for you to go sink your teeth into. An advisory board or a board of directors can be really critical in helping you step out of the forest and see that forest through the trees. And so I recommend it. I think having an advisory board and having people you can go to, one, it's easier to build than you might think, and 2, it can become a really crucial way of getting out of your own head and making sure you're thinking things through from a strategic, optimized way.
Yeah.
How did what I'm thinking, Kevin?
Chase, would you like to be the first
Yeah.
How are you with building and scaling law firms?
How do you feel about professional services, Chase? Yeah.
Depends on what type.
That's right.
That's funny. So I want to talk in a second about some of your lessons learned that you used and incorporated into launching your later ventures. But just before we move on from your first venture a little bit, is there anything you've thought about specifically to that company, kind of looking back like, oh man, if I had done this differently, and maybe we've already touched on one, which is rely on the board a little more, but is there anything else that comes to mind where you're like, man, if I had done this and this differently, like I feel like those were the keys that led to my eventual ouster that could have looked a little bit different. What did that look like for you?
I mean, I think this is overly simplified, but I think it was a beautiful business with the wrong capital structure. When you raise a significant sum of outside capital, it puts a ton of pressure, especially in the short to midterm, to go and drive growth and perform. And I kind of watched this business lose its soul in that process. It's a phenomenal like from a customer standpoint, it was an outstanding business. Great net promoter scores, awesome margins, great team, up into the right trajectory. It was not profitable because we were playing the game of risk and expanding across the board, aggressively trying to go buy growth. And so I think a lot about making sure that the company is paired with the right capital structure, making sure that, we're really passionate today at Decada about this really long-term and patient hold model. I think there's some businesses that do great with a ton of capital and a need to go drive growth, from Uber to Twitter. There's some companies that really just have no business raising that form of outside capital and make really remarkable small businesses or medium-sized businesses, or maybe even large businesses, but will never be a moonshot, home run technology venture. That's just not the kind of company that it was. So yeah, I think that was another takeaway. It felt like we were playing out the arrival fallacy in real life. We were trading short-term comfort and work-life balance in exchange for maybe we'll be able to exit this thing. And so we were just very, um, yeah, we were forcing a lot of short-term pressure into that business, as opposed to running it like the beautiful business that it could have been. We just didn't have that option after we'd raised some capital on it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's fascinating. Well, so let's fast forward a little bit then. So you're ousted from this original company. So what was the next step for you? It sounds like maybe there was a little bit of licking of wounds before kind of turning introspective and kind of a period of growth and things like that. So just let's spend a couple of minutes on it, and then I want to dive deeper on your launch of Taylor Cooperative and Decada Group, et cetera. But
Yeah.
what went on in that interim period? What were you doing? How did you recover and bounce back and
Yeah.
kind of move forward from there?
Yeah, it took me a few years to really know what to do about some of those thoughts. In the sense of, I knew I wasn't fulfilled. I knew entrepreneurship fulfilled me, company building and team building. That was my North Star. But the experience I had was far from fulfilling, not just because of the catastrophic ending, but because of the style in which we were running the company. And I had those thoughts. I don't think I could have put it as pointedly as I just did, but I felt that pull. And so I spent years doing various startup ventures, raising capital, continuing to try to kind of build moonshot 0 to 1 companies. And if you fast forward several years, me and my best friend Adam, who's now my business partner in Decada Group, we were taking a hike down in southern Utah. And we drove down to this hike with no intentions of starting a business together. And we returned with a semblance of a business plan. And he was really kind of picking at, it seems like this kind of dichotomy that we're talking about. It seems like it was such a great business. Why was it not thriving? Like, what was the challenge? And we decided, what would be incredible is if we could start a beautiful lifestyle business, a brick and mortar custom built on the same premise and customer promise of the first business, but not raise a dollar of outside capital, not attempt to be a multi-state, 50-person organization, but really just something that is small, high quality, a great business with great loyal customers, a GM, like out of the gates, essentially. What would happen if we went and started not a surf shop, but a lifestyle business, closer to a surf shop than the company that we had started. And 30 days later, we found lease space. We closed on our first, we signed the lease agreement, and we had our first customer. So we went from idea to revenue in like 30 days. And 18 months later,
incredible.
It was fun. And 18 months later, we were doing $1 million a year top line. It was just a business that just kind of blossomed and grew. And the shop expanded as we went. And I've talked about this before, but the style of company building when you don't have outside capital and that high pressure feels a lot more like sculpting a bust is what I say, where initially you're hacking at it. In year one, you're like pulling off clay and these broad brush movements. And then year two, you're taking out the knife and you're shaping the ear and the nose and you're starting to see a semblance of a head. And then year 3 and 4, you have the scalpel and you're fine tuning. It felt like we were really tinkering on a business and it was improving all the time. And that was so fulfilling. It really scratched that entrepreneurial itch that I had. But in a way that felt more sustainable and long-term than what I was building before. And every year that business got a little bit better. And this was 6-7 years ago. We founded Taylor Cooperative. Our thinking at the time was we would keep it largely independent of our time. And it would maybe, if we're fortunate enough, we could be throwing off some cash flow so that it could fund other entrepreneurial projects on the side. And what we found is we fell in love with Taylor Cooperative and we fell in love with the idea of building small business and what it means to have a small business that's really a part of the fabric of a community and how you can build a strong, exceptional small business. And every year just got a little bit more fun, a little bit better. And that's ultimately what kind of led us to 2020 when we formed Decada Group and made our first acquisition.
So if I'm hearing the origin story right, though, this wasn't launched with a kind of master grand 3, 5, 10-year vision, etc. I mean, what was it literally like starting a custom clothier wasn't even on your radar when you're driving down to southern Utah, and it grew out of effectively a deep conversation with someone that really pushed on what fulfills you and why didn't that one work? how could we do it differently? And you just had this aha moment. I mean, is that kind of what happened?
Yeah, they were long, grueling days of, 10, 15 miles, of nothing to do but talk. And it felt like Adam was just like,
Yeah.
well, why didn't you? Okay, but what about, okay, well, why didn't you do that? And by the end of it, it was like, yeah, you know what? I think we have something here. Why don't we just go start this thing up?
Yeah.
And we
Let's just
started
try it
Taylor
again.
Cooperative on $750. And, sale 1 funded sale 2, and sale 1 and 2 funded sale 3.
Yeah.
And we just kind of grew it and bootstrapped it organically from there.
Yeah. Was there any piece of you, this is a little bit off topic, but before we go to Decada Group broadly, was there any piece of you, with the change in time, a little bit uncomfortable with the industry again? Like, how much work did you put into what is the competitive landscape now, many years later? It feels like, at least from an outsider looking in, that's not huge into fashion, right? People are wearing far less suits. People are in offices far less. Like, how much of that calculus weighed into, there were a lot of lessons to be learned from this business many years ago, and we could do it better, but maybe it's just not the right time anymore. How did you confront that issue?
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, this was very pre-COVID. And as a note, interestingly, luxury suit shops are performing better than ever because while suit volume is down in terms of people buying a suit, when people do go to buy a suit, they want something nicer. So the organic annual growth rate of Taylor Cooperative has been outstanding in the past 7 years. Will it go on?
You're like men's warehouses or...
Yeah, the men's warehouses.
Is that the idea? Like men's warehouse is struggling, but custom is...
Yeah, they're consolidating. They're shutting down.
When was the last time you bought a suit, Kevin?
Oh, God.
Where did you get it from?
I bought one for a wedding. I bought it from Brooks Brothers. It's the only place I bought suits for ever since I became a lawyer.
Are those good? Are those good suits, Brooks Brothers?
You tell me, Chase.
Honestly,
I've always liked them. I thought they were good.
Yeah, I mean, like any large-scale brick and mortar, you're paying for a lot of things that aren't the raw materials when you do swipe your credit card.
Yeah.
So the value is, I would say, mediocre, but the quality is pretty decent. There's certain things that you want to.
It's like, man, you overpaid. You got taken for a ride.
That was a very polite way of saying you got fleeced.
It's a decent. He's like, also, Brooks Brothers, don't sue me for defamation. It was my opinion. For the record.
There's certain brands.
There's
certain brands I advise people to steer away from, like, Hugo Boss, for example. Like, if you look at a pie chart of where your money goes, it's like 40% brand sales and marketing and just, a diluted amount toward the actual product. Brooks Brothers tends to do pretty well. Suit Supply is a really great alternative, but I'm quite biased. Custom is really the way to go in the sense of you're not just buying the raw materials and the fabric and the quality of construction. You're buying something that's made to fit you and flatter your body type and look good on you. And
well, I think that's the biggest thing for me. I infrequently put on a suit, but when I do, like, it's never going to fit right. Even the day I pick it up from having been tailored, like I get the value proposition. The flip side is, as someone who wore suits routinely daily while I was at my first firm, Cravath, it was required, but very often after that, since I left Big Law, I mean, I can count in the last 5 years on one hand the amount of times I put a suit on, which was the impetus for my question. And, so I get it. We're remote. We're work from home. So maybe I'm just not seeing it, but I
haven't
certainly
worn
understand.
a suit in a couple years, but I probably need to soon. You guys want to talk about business? I want to talk about suits for a second. Let's take a detour for just a moment, Chase.
The rabbit hole.
So I like suits. I like Suit Supplies because I think it's a decently priced suit that is customized, which, by the way, this episode is now sponsored by Suit Supply. So send us our check, but I'm kidding. What is a good custom suit? Entry level. I just want to get, 1 or 2 suits because I wear them every couple years or once a year, a couple times a year.
Special event. Yeah.
I want to get a couple really nice suits. I don't want to break the bank. What's the price and how do you go about where would you start?
Yeah. You should probably plan to spend a little over $1,000 for just a foundational investment suit, something that's going to last you decades. If you take care of it right, it's something potentially you hand down to your kids, right? Because what you're buying at that level is you're getting out of the synthetics, out of the fabrics that have some form of plastic, polyester, rayon in it, and you're getting into a really kind of quality wool. But you're also getting the but hopefully at that price point, a decent construction. There's a term in the industry called canvas, horsehair canvas, that is on the inside of the jacket. And back in the Industrial Revolution, the way to quickly mass produce suits was you use essentially glue, a fancy form of glue, to bring the inner and outer shell together. That's called fusible. You fuse the jacket. The problem with a fused jacket, while it's quick and cost effective, is it starts to bubble. Have you ever seen those suits that, like, it's almost like cheap tint on a car? It starts to like delaminate. You start to get that effect in the suit.
Around like the stitching.
Yeah, exactly. And it just doesn't drape softly. It doesn't fit the contour of the silhouette as it should. Suits are one of the oldest articles of clothing in the world. They are highly inspired by the design of military jackets. And they're meant fundamentally to make guys look good. You've got broad shoulders, shoulder padding. It's a long, elongated V. It heightens the body. It has lapels that make your chest look a little bit bigger. It's really a power outfit, right? That's why it has been the uniform of business for decades. And you want that drape.
Thinking about it, I'm reflecting on a certain president that wears suits every single day of his life, which is a choice. Please continue.
That is a choice. So anyway, it's fascinating. There's infinite numbers of things that make a suit, high quality versus low quality. And when you're a mass producer of suiting, you're trying to figure out, okay, how do we construct the suits? What materials are we using? What form of buttons? And the question is whether it's, suiting on its surface. This is a classic item. It's not like a fast fashion item that you expect to own for 3 years and then go get a new one to replace it. And so for that reason, it's a special category within clothing that, you want to invest more so that it's, lasting, and design it in a way where it's meant to kind of outlast some of those trends that cycle in and out. Also, it's just a fun experience. A lot of guys grow up watching Bond films and, kind of thinking about this idea of coming into a bespoke suit shop and fabrics being laid on you in front of a mirror and getting measured.
While we're on suits, and forgive the slightly more, personal to me question, but I'm sure there are listeners who approach an investment in clothing like this from the same mentality I do. I've struggled for a long time to get in shape, continuing to try. And it's one of the reasons why I never have and rarely invest in expensive clothes, because it's always that, well, if I put it off 6 more months, I've lost a few more pounds.
Kevin.
Go ahead, Eric.
Can I interrupt you for a second?
Please.
Car dealership guy just went public.
Oh, wow. Breaking news.
You're on Twitter.
He released a 13.5-minute video. This is car dealership guy.
It's Chase Murdock.
After 2 years on this platform, the secret is finally out.
Who the fuck is car dealership guy is the title of this video.
I mean, I love the balls on that video, though.
This is full production. Oh my God.
Is that a custom tailored coat that we're? No, I'm just kidding.
Anyways, that's fascinating. I'll have to watch it afterwards. This dude built a 500,000 person follower count in
like a year, right? A year and a half.
December of 2021. That's what?
Unbelievable.
A couple of
That's
years. Okay.
He built a media business off of a Twitter account in 2 years.
That's wild.
That is incredible. Anyways, sorry to interrupt, guys. I just thought that was
that's interesting.
somewhat breaking news here in our little niche industry. Our little
this goes live
niche,
we'll break the news.
this for sure.
Yeah. So back to it. How do you answer that question before we move on from suits, Chase? When you're talking to people who are like, that sounds great for you that you can have that suit for 2 decades, but if I go invest $1,500, $2,000 in a suit today, a year ago it's going to Salvation, or a year from now it's going to Salvation Army. Hopefully. Right.
Yeah, it's tricky because a well-tailored suit really flatters the body and like it looks great. It's slimming effect. It's a it's designed to make guys look good fundamentally. But you're right. On the other hand, when weight fluctuates, it can be challenging because the more fitted it is, the more you're feeling the weight fluctuation, right?
Yeah.
When you do go custom, you can actually let the jacket out a great deal more than when you buy something off the rack. And I've had clients come in over the years where we go take it in a few inches, a couple of years later, take it out a few inches and bring it in and out. But there's also performance stretch fabric, which is something we're seeing a lot of innovation around. The old, Italian mills that have been around for centuries are now investing, a ton of R&D to keep up with the likes of Lululemon. It's fascinating to watch this. These old Italian
interesting.
are trying to figure out how to make it water resistant, how to make stretch performance fabrics. Yeah. And so the industry is definitely shifting in small ways, but it's shifting. So sometimes that stretch fabric is the right move.
Chase, how often do you wear suits? And I'll tell you what my problem is with buying or investing in an expensive suit. And it's what you just referenced. This is a chart of my weight from the last 10 years. I shared it on social media yesterday. And look at those fluctuations, guys. And a bunch of people followed suit. They shared their charts too, because I guess I'm not the only person who has a Fitbit here. But from from 185 to 170, all the way up to 200 during COVID. We were having fun during COVID. Is it possible that one suit would have fit me throughout that entire period of time?
So the most important fundamentals of a suit, and you guys are testing my suit knowledge. I tend not to talk about this. I love it. It's been years since I've been thinking about these things. I mean,
you thought we had you on to talk about business.
Yeah, how confused I was. So
we'll get back to business.
Fundamental elements of a suit are the shoulders. Shoulders tend not to adjust as you're putting on weight or losing weight. The length of the jacket, which needs to be proportional to your height and your body type. So it's really in that waist, right, where you button the coat. So you'll feel it. You'll feel it as you put on weight. I think we tend to say you feel every 8 to 10 pounds is about an inch, maybe half an inch, somewhere in that range, which is when you want to start thinking about making adjustments. So if you're inside that 6-pound range, it may feel different, but it's not going to fundamentally look different. If you're fluctuating in a 10 to 15 pound range, yeah, you might totally feel that. So, beyond something where it's get a stretch fabric and cut it, have your tailor cut it in a way where that weight adjustment is planned. I'll tell you something funny though, is we get a lot of wedding clients come in. That's 30-40% of our revenue. And they'll come in and they'll say, without fail, inevitably, okay, well, this is my weight now. But when I come back in for my fitting in a month or two, I promise you guys,
I'll be 20 pounds less.
I'll be 20 pounds lighter. And they never are. Yeah. So it's a kind of a fun joke of the client was really insistent that we're going to cut this so that it fits future client. And sometimes future client is a little rose tinted in the way they're viewing the world.
That's fair. I think there's an analogy there for entrepreneurs, right? And where how smooth sailing we think things are going to go in our businesses. We're well, this is how it is today, but 2 months from now, I promise you, I will be sleeping 8 hours a night.
Yeah.
I've been saying that for 18
months.
I
said, things take twice as long and cost 3 times as much as you expect every single time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's shift a little bit more. So then Tailor Cooperative, it's another startup effectively. You're back to kind of startup entrepreneur. You start from scratch, $750, which is mind blowing to me.
What do you mean $750?
That's how. I'm sorry. Yeah, maybe let's pause there for a second. You said that you started Tailor Cooperative with your partner Adam with $750, right? And the first suit you built paid for the second suit and so on. So what did that look like to start with such little invested capital?
Yeah, I mean, it was fully bootstrapped, right? And so the shop in the very beginning was this teeny 700 square foot, beautiful showroom, but teeny and not street facing. And then eventually we expanded from there. And, we were slanging suits ourselves directly for the first 6 months. And eventually we could hire our first person. So it was very bootstrapped and very cash constrained. We went without pay for about 1.5 years, 2 years to varying degrees. So when you think about all in, it was a bit more than $750, but in terms of out of pocket in order to, get the business started, it was more of a time investment, blood, sweat, and tears than it was a capital
Yeah.
investment, which tends to be the case for 0 to 1, right? 1 to
Yeah.
2, where you're
And
acquiring business, you're bringing in capital, you're sometimes personally guaranteeing debt to go buy that thing that's been built. We had to go sacrifice to go build that thing in the first place.
And what was your one? Was that like your 0 to 1? Was that getting you to the position where you could bring an operator into Taylor Cooperative and start to step back from the active day-to-day management role? Was that?
Yeah, I mean, that was
that
one of many goals, right? I mean, like initially we were getting a lot of product feedback. We were trying to figure out how to go repeatedly and sustainably acquire customers through digital marketing. We're trying to build our online presence, launch our website. We were trying to get repeat customers coming back in. We were launching new products. It was so multifaceted, right? It's just that's the battlefield of the first couple of years starting a business is, you don't have departments, you don't have things already stood up. You're really having to stand everything up for the first time. It's fun. It's incredibly fulfilling, but it's a ton of work. And the goal was to really get a general manager so that we could kind of get on to the next thing and not put all of our career inside this one small business. It's been a great business to us, but I think Adam and I both wanted to work on something a little bit beyond this single business. And to us, the naive vision at the time was if we could be drawing, 5, 6, 7, 10,000 a month each out of the business, that would be sufficient runway so that we could go and start whatever moonshot venture we wanted to on the side, really catalyzed by this small business. And like I said, we were really naive in that. We ended up falling in love with really that process of building small business. And at some point we felt like we had a playbook for small business that was a little bit bigger than our suit shop. And we wanted to go try our hand at acquiring multiple businesses.
So then let's shift for the last segment here into that discussion. And so, I've heard repeatedly that you really fell in love with the suit shop, with that business, with sort of the long-term growth kind of feeling of the custom clothier, et cetera. So walk us through that shift then to the desire to build a diverse holding company as opposed to either reinvesting in organic growth of Taylor Cooperative itself or more of a roll-up model of like, okay, we've got a suit shop. Let's focus on the clothing or fashion industry and, and kind of do things that are sort of vertically integrated or horizontally integrated to some extent. Walk through that calculus of what led you to this model of a diverse holdco.
Yeah. So at the time we were throwing off excess cash and we were trying to figure out, do we go reallocate all of it back into this one business? Do we sweep it and maybe go buy a cabin, or do we do something weird in between? And neither option felt
not a
right.
bad alternative.
It didn't feel like we wanted to go reallocate all of that money back into this business. We were reallocating some of it and the business was growing, but it didn't feel like something we wanted to go all in on. And on the other hand, it didn't feel like it was so formidable that we could start drawing, significant distributions out of. We wanted to go reinvest in something. And it was right as we were having those thoughts that we were presented with an off-market acquisition opportunity. And that was our second business, Workshop SLC. It was essentially a WeWork, but for artists is one of the best ways to describe it. And it was run by a founder who wasn't ready to retire, but this was her second project. And she wasn't allocating enough time and energy into this business and wanted to transition it off to someone who could really invest that time and energy into it. And we were looking at it and seeing a lot of overlap in our playbook. We felt like we could really help hone the brand, help adjust the go-to-market strategy, implement some price changes, and really go grow it. And we acquired Workshop SLC in 2021. And in our first 12 months, and it was a teeny business, but in our first 12 months, we grew it something like 400 or 500%. And we just went to town on this thing, brought it online, launched a website, grew it again the next year, some 200 or 300%. And we felt like by the end of that, we were like, this is kind of working. It's fun. A part of what we got kind of sharpened at was how to really go hire a good general manager who can focus on running the day-to-day. And then fractionalize at the holding company this idea of shared services, of having marketing and finance, where one business on its own can't afford a CMO, definitely not a CFO, but two businesses can start to really offset some of those costs. And this idea of a shared services model started to kind of get born in our minds, trying to figure out how do we go help give these companies a leg up. We've matured a lot since then. We've actually been on this tirade to go decentralize over the past 12 months. But at the time, it was our unfair advantage. We could really breathe fresh life and capabilities into this business that had a lot of runway for growth. And that's what we did with Workshop SLC. So at the time, we weren't thinking about, let's go buy multiple businesses. At the time, we said, this looks like a great business to go try our hand at. And it wasn't until maybe 6 to 12 months into our experience with Workshop SLC that we were like, you know what, this looks like something we could spend the rest of our careers building. A diversified holding company focused on Utah, and focused on these Main Street businesses that are run by retiring owners that are typically led by a very passionate founder and a fire-eyed team of people committed to the product and the customer, but where there's a lot of room to go professionalize, and that we can bring that expertise to the table and help unlock some of that growth.
I posted a tweet. I posted a tweet. I tweeted about hopping on this conversation with you.
No. You posted, Kevin.
Did I post?
It's just a post. There's no tweet anymore. Tweet is gone. It's a post.
I didn't X. Did I X?
So you posted you could say you posted a post, or you could just say I posted. So please continue.
I posted to the platform formerly known as Twitter.
That's right. You posted on X.
A post that we would be talking. And one of the questions that someone wanted to ask was how you evaluate, and you touched on it there a second ago about being kind of local to Utah. How do you evaluate that trade-off of sort of keeping a local focus versus broadening, into whether it's bordering states or nationwide or whatever, to have a broader base of potential business acquisitions and business targets? What was that like? What's driving the local nature? Is it more kind of community focused? Is it just sheer practicality of being able to hop in the car and drive to the business on a moment's notice? How do you evaluate that, and what led you guys to your focus on Utah specifically?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, it's really fulfilling, right? Is to be like part of a community building and helping shape Salt Lake, which is a very fast growing city. It's home for me and Adam. And this is the state I'll retire in. And having businesses that are part of that fabric and a part of that growth is a really fulfilling thing to me in my career. And same for Adam. And that's something that we intentionally want to do with Decada Group. Is if you take a step back and look at the stats, it's kind of alarming. Small business is on the decline. Entrepreneurship and startups are on the decline. There's fewer small businesses per capita today than there ever have been in the history of the world. And post-COVID especially, we're seeing large corporations grow. And it's turning into this real, not to be dramatic, it's turning into this real David and Goliath story of small business is really what enriches a neighborhood and gives a city its distinction. And it's really struggling. It's at an all-time low. And we've all seen, especially post-COVID, retiring small business owners not have buyers, not have something that's transferable and choose to shut down, as opposed to someone come in and steward that legacy. And every day it gets harder to recruit talent, to position products, to price, to market online. And so on one hand, that's kind of our passion. That's really the fuel that drives us. On the other hand, we don't have outside capital. We don't have IRR targets we're trying to hit. This really is, for me and Adam, something of a lifestyle project. We commit to each other. We wanted to create a day-to-day that really transcends the normal goals of exit or retirement. Really, I think if we can carve out a day-to-day that's incredibly fulfilling, building and stewarding great community asset businesses, empowering awesome operators and leaders to grow their careers and grow companies, and create a lot of asset value and kind of financial return as we go, that's a really fun and fulfilling project. And we have that opportunity to do that, thankfully, because of founding Taylor Cooperative and the ability to go build a holding company kind of one at a time in a really intentional and slow way, where we're not out trying to go return capital or hit some return target. We're profitable, we're growing. It's something of a flywheel. We buy good businesses, we work hard to make them great, and we go reallocate the profits into buying more businesses. I think if we had outside capital, a roll-up is strategically a better option. You get to know that industry really well. There's a lot of opportunity to make a dent in a certain industry. For me and Adam, the diversity is the fun. That's what makes our day to day exciting. Jumping from one
That's what's
problem.
attracting you to it. Sure.
So it's very much something we've done to keep Decada Group on our terms, and in a way that we don't feel like we're ever going to get bored of what we're building. It's also a good investment in the sense that holding companies are awesome vehicles for reinvestment and capital allocation. At any given point in time, if I call any of our operators up, they have 10 or 15 potential investments that they'd really like to make in their business, and we can pool those all together and stack rank them based on what makes sense, irrespective of what business. And so the diversity is really fun, and it's built in. And the commitment to stay local to Utah is both, part of our personal conviction of what we're trying to accomplish here in the community, but also, the practicality of we don't want to spend our careers on planes and flying around different states.
Kevin, let me ask him the most important question of the hour here, and I think this should be one of those little clips that we make, because this is the question everybody's going to want to know.
I suspect this is probably the question I was going to ask. Hit us, Eric.
All right, let's see. Should we say it at the same time, Kevin?
Yeah, well, you guys just 1, 2, 3.
Kevin and I are just
1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
Chase, what
you've built businesses from 0 to 1. You've acquired businesses. Talk about the difference between a startup from 0 to 1 and acquiring, where the two things fit together, if they're complementary, and I guess more concretely, if you were to start over tomorrow, are you doing what you did again? Are you starting a business so you can get the business chops and then going and acquiring? Are you skipping and going right to acquiring? Talk to us about building versus buying.
Yeah. I'm grateful for the path we chose, because for us, it allowed us to have a larger surface area of experiments. And we acquired on a smaller end. And by acquiring more businesses, it gave us more opportunity for just rapid fire compounding of learning, right? Just every day was a new problem and a new thing to go solve for. And it's the same in 0 to 1. You learn a lot more in 0 to 1 because it's just all more encompassing. It's the world doesn't want a new business, and your job is to go create that business in a world kind of designed against you. I think it's phenomenal for earning your chops as an operator. Operating a business is challenging, full stop. And I think it's harder in 0 to 1. There's trade-offs. There's reasons why we're doing that 1 to 2 game today. If I had a rich uncle or was independently wealthy, I think to do it all over again, sure, I'd go buy businesses. I think you shortcut one of the hardest parts of company building, which is finding that product market fit and standing up systems and a team and some semblance of an asset. When you're going from 0 to 1, there's no asset, and you're trying to go create an asset, right? 1 to 2, you're buying an asset and you're trying to build upon it. Both are hard. By no means am I saying 1 to 2 is easy or not noble work. It's incredibly challenging, but it's a very different type of hard. So for us, where we are not capital allocators by trade, we're not investors. One of our distinctions as a holding company is our experience as operators. It was incredible for that route. And so, when I think about 0 to 1, I think it's an awesome proving grounds for yourself as an entrepreneur. It's a great way to go learn everything from sales and marketing to product to team leadership to operations to technology. 1 to 2 is a different predicament. It's taking something that someone has already built and trying to add to that. And that is also challenging. You're bringing in debt, so the risk profile is a little bit different, or you're commonly bringing in debt. So it's simply a trade-off. I think everyone who's inclined to get into entrepreneurship should kind of ask what they feel their unique skill set is and where their skills apply best, whether it's 0 to 1 or 1 to 2. But I'm grateful for having done both. I think it's made Adam and I sharper operators as a result of seeing both sides of that equation.
Do you like one more than the other, Chase? Just personally, do you like the acquisition game, or do you like the kind of
I do.
start with $750 in the pocket?
I've always felt the 1 to 2, 1 to 10 more reflects what I'm good at and what I enjoy, which is a lot of systems and structure and operations. And Adam, I think his proclivity, I'd be curious what his answer is, but he loves the 0 to 1 game. He's very inventive and he's kind of an idea guy and loves starting up new channels inside our existing businesses. So yeah, it's a balance. I think what we've had to do as a result of being cash constrained and choosing not to have outside capital is go buy businesses that are a little bit smaller. We call it the death zone of small business. Businesses doing less than 5 million a year in revenue, where it's kind of it's not black and white, 0 to 1 or 1 to 10. It's this weird middle ground in between where we go and we buy businesses that have product market fit established, where they have something good going, but we don't look at it as we're buying a matured, durable asset. We're looking at it as we're buying a platform or vehicle for growth into the next chapter. In other words, we like what's going on and we want to accelerate what's going on and bring this beautiful business into its second chapter. And that feels a lot more like, I'm going to butcher the 0 to 1 analogy, but like 0.75 to 2, or 0.75 to 10, and that's, I think we found is our sweet spot, coming from 0 to 1 as kind of entrepreneurial operators, but we're slowly gravitating and we've kind of moved up the chain with each acquisition that we've made as we've gone.
Yeah.
So I like the 1 to 2 game.
So
pause for just a second, Kevin. We should wrap since we've got till 3. It's 2:47. Yep. We should wrap, and then we can have time to record.
Yeah, I was going to say, so just to pick back up and wrap up here. So I think the final thing, at least on my mind and hopefully on listeners' minds, that's hearing a different style of holdco building, right? That this isn't pressure cooker, roll up as quick as you can, try and increase multiple from 3x to 10x and exit to private equity. Sounds a lot more lifestyle, slower growth, long-term play. What does that look like 7-8 years into doing this? What does the day in the life of Chase look like in that model that may be different from, a little bit more of the aggressive holdco model that people traditionally, I think, in the small business world are thinking about, of like, go until we can exit 5 to 7 years from now?
Yeah. Well, one, I think it positions us well to be good potential stewards to sellers, right? As they're trying to figure out, who do I sell to, and how do I ensure that my legacy is handled respectfully and by people who actually care and are going to be around, right? So we feel like that makes us a good candidate for a retiring owner who they don't want to sell to a private equity-like buyer. They don't want to watch their baby get folded into another company. But also where we can bring it into a second chapter that's hopefully as exciting as its first chapter was, right? So it's not like we're just buying the thing with a ton of debt and hoping we can keep up with inflation and just hold on as tight as we can. We're actually trying to figure out, Mr. or Miss Seller, what were some things you haven't been able to do with this business that if you could wave a wand, like what would you want to happen to this business over the next 10 or 15 years? And really be good stewards, not just in protecting what they've built, but adding to what they've built in a way that honors that legacy. So our time is, one of the most important things that we do is buy great businesses and hire the right operator to help steward that company under our guidance. And so it's meeting with our operators, it's coaching them, acting as a very hands-on board, jumping in when needed to help support, and just making sure that we are making the right decisions inside our portfolio to grow our companies, keep them as durable, multi-decade long-term assets that are strong businesses that we're proud to, put forward into our community.
Yeah. No, I love that. Chase, really appreciate you joining, man. Just such a fascinating story. I think super inspiring to a lot of people that will be listening to this. So appreciate you openly sharing. We always like to wrap up giving you the opportunity to share anything interesting projects you're working on that you want people to know about, and where can people find you if they want to learn more about you and Decada Group.
Awesome.
Feel free to plug or shout out whatever you'd like.
Happy to. Well, thanks for the invite, guys. This is a fun conversation. Well, yeah, you can find me on Twitter, Chase Murdock. I recently launched a newsletter called Local Legends. You can find a link on my Twitter there. But otherwise, happy to help searchers that are earlier on in their journey, or operators that have made the acquisition and are struggling through the J curve. DMs are open, and I'm just excited by the fact that there's this growing space of folks interested in stewarding small businesses. I think that creates a richer world where smart people are choosing to not go into consulting or private equity and are choosing to go buy, otherwise mundane businesses, to use the word. So if I could be helpful to anyone in that journey, I would love to really help there, but not much to plug otherwise.
Kevin, was that the same question you were going to ask?
It was not. My last question was the one I was actually going to ask.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Close, but no.
Close, but no cigar.
We would have been talking over each other.
Yeah,
Thanks again, Chase. Always a pleasure.
Chase.
All right, guys. Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Mundane Millionaires. If you enjoyed what you heard in this episode, make sure to follow Mundane Millionaires wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. See you next time.